Hey, this is Todd. I finally got that last video in the hexcrawling series up. It was a pain, but it was nice to see it up on YouTube. I hope everyone's enjoying it. I'm going to be going out of town next week, just into the country through the 4th of July weekend and maybe a little bit beyond. We'll see how that goes. Just a little family trip to relax. A smarter man than I might have created a whole backlog of videos that I could have ready to rock and roll and just automatically deploy every few days to keep everybody happy. But of course, that was a smarter man than me. I got nothing. The internet's pretty spotty up there. I'll see what I can do if some stuff comes to me, and if I have some things I want to share. Maybe I'll have a chance to post something. Maybe I can sneak into town, and I know there's a couple of coffee shops and restaurants that have Wi-Fi. If I can sneak in there and throttle down their Wi-Fi by uploading something to YouTube, we'll see what I can do. But there may be a quiet week coming up, so apologies in advance, and I hope you understand, and hopefully I'll come back, and if I haven't done anything in the interim, then I'll be, my mind reset and ready for more. One of the things I like to do with these videos, because I'm not trying to plan them and I'm not trying to talk about any sort of grand topics, is that I can basically riff on stuff that I've seen in social media or I've talked to people about. And what got me inspired to go ahead and hit the record button this afternoon was I was watching the sort of final review of Time Stories by the Dice Tower. Time Stories is I guess it's both an engine and an engine of a game, and then a story arc of multiple episodes that you undertake with this kind of game engine. It's a board game. I haven't played it myself. I've watched some guys play it at a game store one time, and it didn't seem to really be my jam. But I always appreciate watching or reading reviews of different things because you get to see the insights and what people are talking about. And even if you haven't played that particular game, I find a lot of times there might be some interesting information I can glean with it. And I think it was Z Garcia talking about how there was an aspect of that game that sounded great in concept. Now, he didn't finish the thought, but what he was inferring or what he was really saying was that it sounded great in concept, but it did not work in play. And what they were talking about in that game was that you have to end up repeating a lot of the scenarios a lot, in a sense, going through as if you were playing, Groundhog's Day. But unlike it, and they pointed this out too, but unlike it, a movie like Groundhog's Day, or I forget the Tom Cruise sci-fi one where they do the same thing, Edge of Tomorrow, you are not just getting the highlights. In those movies, what they do is so that everyone's not bored to tears, you don't actually play out the whole day in the film. They'll show one day, maybe all the way through, and then they'll start to cut it until they're only showing you the moments where stuff's changing. And their point was that it may have sounded great in this concept of, you're going to go through and play this multiple times, but when you play it, it just becomes a drag, particularly if there are other elements of the game, which I think they felt like overplaying the episodes, that it was drag. But I'm not really trying to talk about Time Stories. I haven't even played it. But this really kind of was something that spoke to me, because I feel like this is an issue that a lot of GMs have. I think all GMs have it, and it's one in which you have this idea you just feel is tremendous. And it may be tremendous in concept, but that we lose sight of the fact that it's not a concept. It's something that people have to play through. And just like we forget that in a movie or a story where they're trying to tell, say, a repetition, they don't actually force the reader or the viewer to repeat the entire 24 hours a day or whatever cycle it is, that they'll use other tools to reduce that, so you're just seeing the moments you need to hit. I think with whatever the concept is that a GM may have, there are those concepts that they may work great, and in your mind's eye, you're playing it through, and you may be seeing it like, this is going to be like Edge of Tomorrow, but you've forgotten in Edge of Tomorrow, you don't see Tom Cruise do everything every single time. It jumps to the important decisions. But in your mind, you have that view of Edge of Tomorrow, and then when you put it in front of your players to play it, you're grinding them through like, okay, you wake up, and then, you have to grind through every single event of the day over and over again. And this actually came up in a different way. I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday. I see this come up on Reddit quite often. I had seen it come up again, and it just kind of got me fired up, as these things are going to do. And it was a concept that was basically, let's have the players create mid to high level characters. I think in the case that this particular DM on Reddit was talking about, it was level 12. So we're going to have them create level 12 characters. They're going to end up in this situation, the scenario to start off the game. They're going to die, and then they're going to have this entourage of like low-level characters, and then each one of the players in their entourages, a level 1 character will escape, and that's their new character. What a way to start the game. Well, that seems like actually an awful way to start the game, but I can understand the concept. And I've seen it before in video games. I think this is where this trope comes from, because I see it a lot in Reddit. We're going to start them at a high level, then we're going to drop them down to the first level again, and then they're going to work their way back up. And I totally have seen this in more than one video game where you start off with, say, Spider-Man with all his powers unlocked to their max. You get to fight a few villains, you do this or another, and something happens. Either you time warp back in time, or you get weakened, or you lose your battle suit, whatever it is, and then you start back from the beginning, and you start to work your way up. And in those games, and I'm sure this is what DMs think too, that there's this idea of you're going to get a taste of high level, look at the stuff you can have, and now you'll have this goal to get back up there. But there's a big difference between when that happens in a video game and when it happens in a role-playing game. The first thing is, when you're doing it in a video game, you're not going through, there's no sign of it, really no attachment to these characters. When I just pick up a game and, I'm Spider-Man, I have no attachment to that character. So if he starts off at 12 level and then dips down, it doesn't really matter to me. It took me 30 seconds to plug in the game and hit the start button, have a little fun, then I drop down. There's no investment. If you're sending your players home to build 12th level characters, one, there's a sizable investment of time they may be making into building out those characters. It is not a 30-second deal to roll out level 12 characters. And then even if you put that aside, so you've made it, so you've gone home as a player, you've gone home, you've done everything, you've built up this character, and then you spend the whole week or however many days before game day, and you're thinking about, I can't wait for this, and I'm just thinking, man, this guy's going to be great. I really dig his story, and I'm really super excited to see what's going to come of it. And then you get in, and it's not even one session, and they ripped that guy away from you and handed you a fresh level 1 sheet. Can't think of things much more deflating than that, particularly when it's clear that they've been planned. I don't want to divert this into a railroading discussion, but the one thing with the series is that it's planned. It's not like, they come in and it's going to be a hard encounter, and maybe something will happen if they don't, where they're going to start from fresh, which would be, it is what it is. But at least that would, that's something that's left up to the dice. In these scenarios, it's really, no, this is going to happen. No matter what, your character's going to die. Or if they don't die, you're going to get time warped back to first level, or whatever it is. That's tough. As a player, it's just tough to eat that. And I said this on Twitter, I didn't understand the purpose. I think I've seen some DMs say, like, I want to give them a taste of what that high-level power is like. But again, one, it's not a taste when they've spent hours building up to it. Then they put that investment in. So that's different than if you were going to hand them, when they walk into the room and they have level 1 sheets, and you're going to hand them a level 12 sheet and say, here, you're going to start off with this first, and then we're going to move on to that. Which would at least be honest in the meta of putting the players in the right mind space. Like, okay, we're going to borrow this level 12, and I have my level 1 guy, and that's great. And then I have no attachment to this level 12 guy, so I can just have fun with him, and if they die, they die. I don't care. That's a totally separate thing. In this case, you're saying, it's worth it for the taste. Well, you have to think about the time and you put in. You put in a lot of effort. 1 or less than a session, or however much time 1 encounter's worth of a taste, probably not going to cut it. You're probably not even going to really, unless you just go all out full bore and just blow off every ability you have, you're not even going to see that much, because if you're playing it like you think you're going to keep progressing with this character, I might save some powers. I'm not going to just blow all my my once a day long rest powers, because I don't know what's happening. I don't know that there's not going to be 3 or 4 things after that. So I'm going to be conservative. So I might end up in it and think, I didn't even really get to test this guy out much at all. Right? So that would be the first thing. The second thing is, you don't know in a role-playing game if these guys who are, who are level 12 and they're going to get time warped down to level 1, you don't know that they're going to take the same path to level 12. So maybe at one point I was going to build this guy level 12 and, I get a taste and I like it. But as I go back to level 1, maybe that guy dies. Maybe I go another path. There's no guarantee at all that I'm going to go back up like you are in a video game. And if I go and I start up at Spider-Man level 12 and then I get zapped to Spider-Man number 1, the game knows I'm playing Spider-Man. I'm going to get Spider-Man back up to level 12 unless I just quit the game. Like, it's an inevitability. It is by far not inevitable, unless you've really structured your game like that taking a guy who's level 12, then bouncing down to level 1, and that same guy or same type of guy is going to end up at level 12 again. You can't count on that kind of symmetry the way a video game can, and you probably shouldn't. You don't know. I mean, it doesn't even have to be death. Maybe I get to level 3 or 4 or 5, and I don't like this guy anymore. I had to pause the video because my daughter came home quite unexpectedly, and I have since thrown her in the bath. So if you hear any strange noises or little splish splashes in the background, that's her in her bath. It's probably a good thing. I think I was getting a little sidetracked on that one scenario of the taking high-level or mid-high-level characters and then for a scenario and then dropping them down for the campaign. I guess back to the point I was trying to make which was and is, that you want to be careful of things that sound good conceptually, but then when you get them in front of the table and actually want to play them, do not play well. Now, some of this you have to just learn. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to think things are great, and they're not great. And, look, on the flip side, there are some things that you're going to read about it in your brain or write it down, and you're going to think, this sounds awful. And your players will dig it, and it will be amazing. It will play much better than it sounds. I think more often we're too tough on ourselves on ideas that we think conceptually are bad or simple or dumb or whatever it is. And in actuality, they play really well. And then there are concepts which we feel are really great and high, and they're striking all these notes, and they're going to be, simulating or stimulating all these chakras in our party, and they just fall flat. But one thing you can do is really think about testing that idea. Don't forget what it was like to be a player. Take your idea and really think, well, if I'm on the player side, if this was a game I was going to and not running, maybe if I can take myself out of the GM chair and say, okay, I'm a player, and now I'm going to go through these steps. How does it sound now? How does it feel? And some of it is like this thing with the scenario, whatever. It was like, one game day, it's always going to go down. So it's very easy to kind of look at it and say, well, here's what's happening. This is what's going to happen. It's all happening at once. So the at least the cause and effect or the entire, essentially the entire concept plays out like that. Plays out one game day, the concept plays out, boom. Some concepts play out a lot longer, and it can be harder to figure out. So there's another concept I read about on Reddit, which, again, it sounds really cool. The party's trapped in hell, and they have to go fight through the 7 deadly sins to escape. Sounds great. But it seemed like the way it was getting structured was a bunch of dungeons, and there was going to be a dungeon for each one of the sins, and then maybe there'd be some monsters representing that sin, and then you're going to do this 7 times and then escape. Now it goes from like, wow, that's a cool kind of concept to, okay, so now you're saying if everything goes right, you have to plow through these dungeons, 7 dungeons in a row to get out of hell, right? And because you're in hell, it means that you don't have a lot of other stuff to do because it's hell. It's not like you're in this, you have 7 mega dungeons spread around the world, Zelda style, and you get to explore a little bit of this and you get to do a little bit of that. It sounded more like you're trapped in hell. The only way to go out is basically go in a linear style, dungeon, 7 times to come out. Now, I get the whole high concept of, the 7 sins and what does that mean? But each sin is really just going to boil down to monsters. So it's lust, so it's going to be harpies and some other things. And now it's gluttony, I guess. And I don't know, gibbering mouthers and other things, whatever it is. So you're going to flavor these dungeons according to these sins, but it's just going to be a linear thing. And that's where you get into the fact that this concept you have, which is somehow working with the 7 deadly sins, is a good concept. But the way you've structured that, or the way it's in a practical sense you're going to put that in front of your party, maybe not the best idea. Now, it doesn't mean that concept in any shape can't fly, and it doesn't even mean that it can't fly as dungeons, but then it's putting a lot of pressure on those dungeons. They really need to be really interesting, really cool, really different from each other dungeons, because otherwise it's going to feel like one huge dungeon that the party's going to have to go through. And if each of these dungeons you foresee as being a session or 2 sessions or 3 sessions for each dungeon, then you're looking at, man, that's a lot of dungeon crawling without any sort of other outlets, because you're not going to, if you're on a path going out, assuming that each one of these leads to the next one, and at the end of it's your doorway, there's nothing to go back to, there's no breathers you can take, there's not going to be many side missions on offer, the scenery's not going to change, you're in hell, so it becomes one giant linear dungeon. So you have to try to get out of your own brain, if you can. This is one of those things, I think Reddit and these places are good for it, to a certain degree, of giving you something to bounce your ideas off of and seeing what people say. Seeing if there's some curmudgeon that, like me, that's going to say, like, man, that doesn't sound like a great idea. Or think of it from your player standpoint, if you have to spend hours creating a character and then you lose it right away. If you have friends who aren't in your game, think about bouncing off of them. And I think I think it's not a bad thing, even for the party itself. If this is a campaign starter, it doesn't hurt to just be open about it and say, hey, we're going to do it in a cinematic style. We're going to be in the future, and this is what's going to happen. Then we're going to cut to the past, and you're going to kind of try to build back up to that moment. That can also be fun. And I think the benefit of letting the players be in on it is, yes, you lose whatever surprise it is that you're going to have. If it's supposed to be a surprise, it's gone. But not all surprises are good. So sometimes it's good to lose the surprise, because the other side of it is that they can feel part of the process, number one, because they're in on it. Number two, they will be prepared for it. When they have these level 12 characters and they meet their end at the end of this beginning scenario, they're in on it. They're not going to feel bad. They're not going to. They may even be like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to put a lot of thought into this level 12 character because I know he's dying soon, and that should be fine because all they're there to do is basically be a placeholder. Whatever it is, they can feel like they have that control back, that they understand what's going on and they're in on it, as opposed to this is being basically a ha-ha moment played on top of them, which sometimes can work great, sometimes doesn't. So I think an underrated solution to a lot of these problems is just tell the players. I know DMs and D&D DMs in particular, we always like to keep our secrets. We always want to keep our surprises. We don't want the players to kind of be in on it. We want to have that screen, and behind the screen you shall see nothing. You know, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. But I think there's a lot to be said of using some techniques from things like Dungeon World and Played by the Apocalypse, these other gaming engines that bring the players in the creative process a little bit. And one way you can do that with these type of scenarios, particularly if you're not sure whether your high concept art piece is going to play in practical terms at your table, is put it before the party and say, this is something I was thinking about. I think it's going to be cool, but I'm not playing this by myself. I'm playing it with you. What do you think? Doesn't seem to be a bad thing. Anyway, that's all I got for now. Hopefully I'll have some videos that maybe I can get ready for next week at the last minute, or I can somehow manage to get online from the country. Otherwise, it may be a little while, but I will talk to you later.